Hello YouTube friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is video number 2 in the feeding series, and today I'm going to talk about feeding my fish something unusual that many of you probably don't feed them, and that's algae. Algae is very, very nutritious. The fish love it, and the way I feed it to them is I harvest it from what is called an algae scrubber. And I'm going to show you how it's done. Normally what you do is an algae scrubber will run for a week. Then you pull it, you take it down, and you go ahead and you scrub it up, get the algae off of it and hang it back up again. Because as it's making algae, what happens is it is consuming nitrates and at the same time absorbing CO2 and releasing oxygen. So it's a very, very good thing to have. However, I can skip that scrubbing step, and I'm going to show you why and how my fish are doing all the heavy lifting when it comes to cleaning. And I'm going to show it to you in a time lapse so you can see just how effective they are. Okay? Let's go ahead and get into it. The algae scrubber sits on the wall, on the side wall of the 100-gallon acrylic tank, and so the first step of what you would call my cleaning or maintenance process with this algae scrubber is to pull it off the wall and then to lay it out in a way that the fish can get to it. A thin layer of algae usually develops on the aquarium wall that is picked at by the fish. And also, of course, you can see a lot of thick and rich algae on the scrubber itself. Let me go ahead and position it here so that the fish can access it and you can see it on the camera easily. And the fish will work on both the scrubber and the wall at the same time. You can see some of them actually start off on the wall first, and then they'll work their way over to the scrubber. And I didn't realize clown loaches were so interested in algae. I know they're a bit carnivore. You know, they like their protein, but boy, they love that algae. And there are other fish I've noticed that really go after the algae, like the benga, you know, the sunshine benga. But let's go ahead and speed this up, and you can see how I don't really need to pull the scrubber out like you would do traditionally. You'd usually pull the scrubber out, give it a scrub with something like a toothbrush, and clean off the wall, then hang the algae scrubber back up. I really don't even need to do that. I mean, I just do a light brush on the wall at the end of this process, but I let the fish do all of the heavy lifting when it comes to the cleaning. You can see the pleco getting in there. You would expect the pleco to just sort of park himself inside of it, but there's so much activity inside of that scrubber that he comes in for limited amounts of time, but he does get a nice big dose of algae. As you can see already, some of the thick algae is already disappearing, and they're working their way down to the textured white material that is on the algae scrubber that provides the algae a place to grow. And so, interestingly enough, the pleco seems to like the edges of the scrubber. Maybe that's easier for him to use his suction mouth. Maybe that's an easier place for him to access, or maybe the rough edges on that white material, maybe that irritates him a little bit. I don't know, but he does seem to like the edges of the scrubber. So you can see they're making progress. We can see patches of white starting to show up, and they continue to work on it. Usually from the late morning until the mid-afternoon is usually about how long this process will take. That's about how long I did the time-lapse photography on this particular video shoot. As the algae starts to get cleaned up, the fish, of course, start to become less interested. A combination of the algae being less available and the fish being full. The clown loaches continue to come around. They just can't resist it. And as you can see now, towards the end of the afternoon, the scrubber has gotten into a shape that it's pretty much ready to go ahead and hang back on the wall. take a look at that sidewall. They've pretty much cleaned that off almost entirely. And I'll still give it a very light algae, like an algae sponge cleaning, just to make sure it's nice and clean before I hang up the scrubber. But that wall is pretty cleaned off between the pleco and the fish pecking at it. So there you see, it's that algae scrubber is, apart from some of the hard to get to edges and corners, pretty much like new. Good job, fish. So there you have it. How cool is that? Let the fish do the heavy lifting, and all I've got to do is just clean a little bit of residual algae off the aquarium wall and hang that scrubber back up, and I'm good to go. And the fish did all the work for me. So makes that product even better.